I still remember the day they cast me out. The sun was high above the forum, and the crowd's voices echoed like thunder through stone corridors. I had been accused of theft, a crime I didn't commit. But truth rarely matters when power speaks louder than justice. They gave me no trial, only judgment. A single scroll sealed my fate. _exile _. No gold, no home, no family. Just a tattered cloak, worn sandals, and a path that led far beyond the safety of Rome. 4 days I wandered. Hunger gnawed at my belly. Fear kept me awake at night. I passed ruined farms, abandoned roads, and once thriving villages, now silent as tombs. Then I saw it, a cluster of broken huts nestled between two dry hills. Smoke rose weakly from one chimney. Dogs barked, children stared, and from behind cracked wooden doors, eyes watched me like I was an omen. This place had no name on any map. Some called it _last hope _. Others whispered of it as _the forgotten _. It was the poorest village in all of the empire, and for me, it became home, or perhaps a grave waiting to be filled. I walked in with nothing, no welcome, no kindness, only silence. I asked for water. They gave me a hollow gourd. I asked for shelter. An old woman pointed to a broken shed near the edge of the fields. That night, I lay on cold earth, wrapped in rags, listening to the wind howl like wolves outside. I thought I wouldn't survive the week, maybe not even the night. But something inside me refused to give up. Not because I was strong, not because I was brave, but because giving up meant letting them win. There was no bread, no wine, no figs, nothing soft or sweet, only coarse barley flour mixed with water and baked over hot stones. That was our meal, once a day if we were lucky. The people here spoke Latin, but it was rough, broken, full of strange sounds. Some still clung to old dialects from before Rome came. They didn't trust outsiders, and I was the outsider. Children threw rocks. Women spat on the ground when I passed. Men avoided my gaze, unless they wanted to test me. Sleep came rarely. The nights were cold, and the rats were bold. I learned to keep my few belongings close. A scrap of cloth, a small knife I'd hidden in my boot. Water came from a muddy stream 3 times a day. You had to line up early, or go thirsty. Firewood was scarce. Everyone fought for scraps. Even dogs looked half-starved. One evening, I tried to trade my belt for a handful of lentils. The man laughed at me. "You'll trade better when you're hungry enough," he said. He was right. 2 days later, I gave him my tunic instead. That was when I realized this wasn't just survival. It was learning how to live without dignity, without comfort, without hope, and still find a reason to get up each morning. It took weeks before anyone spoke to me without hatred in their voice. Most ignored me. Others made it clear I didn't belong. One afternoon, while trying to help mend a fence around a grain storehouse, a boy hit me with a rock. It struck my shoulder. He ran off before I could say a word. Later, I found out he was the son of the village elder. No apology, no punishment, just a shrug and a muttered, "Boys will be boys." Trust was earned here like blood from stone. Every smile felt fake. Every handshake might hide a dagger. At night, I heard whispers behind thin walls. They said I was cursed, that my presence brought bad harvests. Some believed I was a spy from Rome, sent to judge their poverty. Even those who shared food did so with suspicion. "Eat," they would say, "but don't forget who gave you this." I knew I had to prove myself. But how do you earn respect in a place where everyone is barely surviving? I started helping without being asked. I carried water for the sick. I dug trenches during floods. I stood guard at night when others slept. Slowly, the stare softened. One woman offered me dried herbs. Another gave me a blanket. and the boy who threw the stone. One day, he handed me a piece of bread without a word. It wasn't much, but it was a start. My shelter was little more than a pile of sticks covered in animal hides. Rain leaked through the roof, soaking the floor. Wind howled through the cracks like ghosts moaning for mercy. In winter, frost crept along the walls by dawn. In summer, the heat turned the hut into an oven. There was no escape from the elements. I patched the roof with straw and mud. I stuffed cloth into the gaps between the beams. Still, the cold never fully left. I slept curled in a ball, arms wrapped around my knees. I dreamed of warm baths, soft beds, and laughter by the fire. Those dreams faded quickly in the morning light. The hut had no lock. Anyone could enter. I hid my few belongings under the floorboards. A carved stick I used to write messages, a small pouch of salt, and a broken mirror. One night, I woke to footsteps. Someone had come in while I slept. I grabbed my knife, heart pounding, but it was just an old man named Lucius. He placed a bundle of dry grass beside me and whispered, "For warmth." That was the moment I realized, even here, in this broken place, there were still good souls. One morning, a group of men argued loudly by the granary. The harvest had failed again. There wasn't enough grain to last the month. Tensions flared. Voices rose. Fists clenched. Someone shouted, "We can't feed everyone." I stayed back, watching. Then one man lunged. Another dodged. A brawl erupted. I didn't want to fight, but when someone shoved me aside, knocking me to the dirt, something snapped inside. I got up. I pushed back. Someone swung at me. I ducked. I punched. I fell. I got up again. By the end, I was bruised and bleeding, but I hadn't backed down, and that changed everything. After that day, people stopped looking at me like I was invisible, or worse, a burden. I still didn't have much, but I had proven I could stand my ground. Still, I knew this wasn't a victory. It was just another battle in a war for survival, and the hardest trials were yet to come. It started with a whisper in the dark. One night, as I sat by the fire, an old man named Cassius approached me. His eyes were sharp despite his age, and his voice was low enough that only I could hear. "You want to live?" he asked. I nodded. "Then you must work for it," he said. "Not with your hands, not with your strength, but with your silence." He told me about a hidden trade, not of gold or spices, but of knowledge. Letters, messages, smuggled between villages, sometimes even sent toward Rome itself. The village had no official courier, no real connection to the empire, but people still needed to speak. Wives wanted news from husbands at war. Farmers sought buyers beyond the hills, and some wanted to send secrets. Cassius offered me a job. Carry these messages, deliver them quietly, ask no questions, say nothing. In return, I would get food, shelter, protection. But there was a cost. If caught, I would be branded a traitor. If betrayed, I could be killed. Still, I agreed. That night, I took my first scroll, tied in wax, sealed with a symbol I didn't recognize, and buried it beneath the floorboards until morning. This was how I survived, not just with strength, but with secrets. And those secrets came with a price far greater than I ever imagined. It happened during the dry season. A gust of wind knocked over a cooking pot near the central fire pit. Sparks flew. One landed on a pile of straw used for bedding. Within moments, flames roared through the center of the village. Panic broke out. People screamed. Children cried. Women rushed to save what they could. I ran to my hut. Smoke already poured through the cracks. Inside, I grabbed my few belongings, the mirror, the salt pouch, the carved stick, and fled. Everything else burned. By dawn, half the village was gone. Crops ruined. Homes reduced to ash. Hope turned to dust. I sat on the ground, staring at the ruins of my life. Again, I had nothing. 4 hours. I didn't move, didn't eat, didn't speak. Then someone placed a bowl of water in front of me. An old woman. She didn't say a word, just looked at me and walked away. Something inside me shifted. I realized that losing everything wasn't the end. It was a test. Would I give up? Or would I rebuild? I chose to rebuild. I helped clear the debris. I dug new trenches for water. I carried stones for new walls. I worked harder than ever before. And slowly, so did others. Together, we rebuilt more than homes. We rebuilt trust, unity, purpose. Fire took everything. But in its place, it gave me something stronger. Purpose. It arrived wrapped in cloth, soaked in oil to protect it from rain. Cassius handed it to me personally. This one's different, he warned. Don't read it. Don't speak of it. Deliver it only to the man in the next village. No one else. I studied the seal. It bore the mark of a Roman magistrate. A rare sight this far from the city. I didn't ask questions. I knew better now. The journey took 3 days. Through thick forests, across muddy rivers, past abandoned farms where wolves howled at night. When I reached the village, the man who met me wore fine clothes, too fine for such a poor place. He took the letter without a word and disappeared into his home. That night, I stayed in a stable, cold, damp, but safe. The next morning, the man returned. He looked at me like he saw something dangerous. "You've done well," he said, "but forget this path, forget this village, forget me." I left quickly. Only later did I learn the truth. The letter contained orders to arrest several villagers suspected of smuggling grain to rebel tribes. Had I hesitated, questioned, or delayed delivery, lives might have been lost, including mine. That message changed me forever. I wasn't just carrying words anymore. I was carrying fate. It started with small things. My food tasted strange one evening. My hut was broken into while I was away. Rumors spread again that I was cursed, that I brought ruin. Then came the attack. I was walking alone when 2 men blocked my path. One I recognized, the elder's nephew. The other, a stranger with a knife. "You should have never come here," the older one said. They beat me, left me bleeding by the river. When I woke up, my face was swollen. My ribs ached. My mind raced. Why now? Why after all this time? Later, I learned the truth. Someone had paid them. Paid to make sure I wouldn't survive another week. But why? Because I knew too much. Because I had seen too many secrets pass through my hands. Someone wanted me gone. For good. But I was still breathing. And if someone thought they could erase me so easily, they didn't know me at all. I don't know exactly when it changed. Maybe when I stood up after the beating. Maybe when I delivered the last message. Or maybe the day the villagers stopped calling me the outsider. Whatever it was, I had become one of them. I had survived hunger, cold, betrayal, fire, and fear. I had learned to find light in darkness, meaning in madness, brotherhood in a place where everyone fought for themselves. When I finally left that village, not as a prisoner, not as an exile, but as a free man, I carried no riches, no gold, no titles, but I carried something far greater: strength, hope, and the proof that even in the poorest corner of the greatest empire, a person can rise from nothing and carve their own destiny. I returned not rich, but I returned alive, and that made me a victor. When I first arrived, the children were the cruelest. They threw stones, mocked my accent, chased me like a stray dog. But over time, something changed. They saw me helping their mothers carry water, saw me fixing broken tools, saw me standing up for those who couldn't stand on their own. One boy, no older than 10, came to me one day with a wooden sword. He asked if I would teach him how to fight. I looked at his face, a dirt street, eyes full of hope, and realized something. These children had never known anything but struggle. Their days began before sunrise, gathering firewood or herding goats. Their nights were spent in huts where hunger was louder than the wind. Yet still they played, still they laughed, still they dreamed. I started teaching them small things. How to carve names into wood, how to tie knots, how to read the stars when there was no oil left for lamps. The village had no school, no teacher, no books, but knowledge is not bound by scrolls or stone walls. And so, I became their teacher, not because anyone asked me to, but because someone had once handed me bread when I had nothing, and now I could do the same, not with food, but with words. Some would grow up to be farmers, some would leave for the cities, a few might even reach Rome, but all of them deserved to believe they could. In every hardship, it was the women who held the fragile pieces together. While men argued over scraps, the women worked from dawn until the fires burned low. They cooked what little food we had. They nursed the sick. They kept the homes standing when the roofs leaked and the walls cracked. One woman, Marcella, became like a mother to many of us, including me. She was in her late 40s, with hair streaked white and hands worn from years of grinding grain. She had lost 2 sons to illness and 1 to war. Still, she smiled. Still, she sang as she worked. Still, she gave without expecting thanks. It was she who taught me that strength isn't always loud, that sometimes the bravest thing is to keep going when everything around you is falling apart. I watched her wrap wounds with cloth torn from old tunics. I saw her calm crying children with stories passed down from her own grandmother. She told me once, a village doesn't die when its buildings fall. It dies when kindness stops. And in that place, that forgotten, starving, wind-swept place, kindness didn't stop. Because of women like her, every village has a leader. Ours was an old man named Gaius, bent with age, but sharp in mind. He ruled not with power, but with memory. He remembered better times, remembered when there was enough grain to last winter, when traders passed through twice a year. Now, he ruled over dust and silence. Still, he kept order, not with soldiers or laws carved in stone, but with rules spoken and repeated. No stealing, no killing, no betrayal. Break one, and you were cast out, just as I had been. Once, I asked him why he didn't try to ask Rome for help. He looked at me with tired eyes and said, Rome only sees what it wants to see, and this place, it chose to forget. That was the truth of our village. We were invisible, forgotten by the empire, left behind by history, but within those forgotten walls, we made our own world. Gaius died in his sleep during the 3rd winter I was there. The next morning, we buried him under the old olive tree near the stream. No marble, no statue, just a simple stone with his name scratched into it. And yet, everyone came. Men, women, children, all stood in silence, because he had been the last link to a time when we still believed we mattered. Love is rare in places where survival is uncertain, but it finds a way. There was a woman named Livia, younger than me, with dark eyes and a quiet strength. She worked the fields, mended clothes, and cared for her younger siblings after their parents died. We spoke often about dreams, about escape, about whether the gods still watched over people like us. One night, under the stars, she took my hand. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. For a moment, I forgot about hunger, about fear, about exile. I just felt alive. But love in a place like that comes with risk. If you give your heart, you open yourself to loss, and loss comes easily in the poorest corners of the world. Eventually, she left. Her uncle found work in a nearby town and took her with him. She promised to write, to send word, to return. I never heard from her again. But still, I remember her, because in that place, where life was hard and hope was scarce, she reminded me what it meant to feel joy, to feel warmth, to feel human. When I finally decided to leave, it wasn't because I hated the place. It was because I had survived long enough to dream again. I had learned to live with little, to find meaning in small things, to see beauty in brokenness. But I also knew that staying forever would mean accepting that this was all life had to offer, and I refused to believe that. So one morning, I packed my few belongings, the mirror, the salt pouch, the carved stick, and the letter I never sent. I walked past the old olive tree, past the granary, past the huts where I had slept, bled, and laughed. At the edge of the village, I turned back one last time. No one came to say goodbye, but maybe that was better, because saying goodbye would have meant leaving it behind, and I never truly did, because part of me will always belong to that forgotten corner of the Roman Empire, the poorest village, the place that tried to break me, and failed. I didn't leave the village with riches or titles. I left with something far more valuable, understanding. I learned that hunger teaches patience, that cold builds endurance, that silence can be louder than screams. I learned that people are not defined by where they come from, but by how they choose to live when everything is taken away. In Rome, we were taught that strength came from power, from gold, from law. But in that forgotten place, I found a different kind of strength, one built on resilience, on kindness shared between those who had nothing, on the will to keep going when every day could be your last. I also learned that fear is not always a weakness. Sometimes it's what keeps you sharp, what makes you listen before you speak, what makes you move before it's too late. And most importantly, I learned that even in the darkest places, hope finds a way, but through people, through small acts of courage, through quiet defiance, through the decision to believe that tomorrow must be better than today. That belief kept me alive, and now it carries me forward. The road out was long and lonely. At first, I walked 4 hours without seeing another soul. Only wind, only dust, only the sound of my own footsteps. I passed abandoned farms, ruined temples, villages swallowed by time. Once, I came across a group of traders heading east. They eyed me with suspicion. My clothes were worn, my skin weathered by years of sun and wind. But I spoke Latin. I knew their roots, and I offered to help carry goods in exchange for bread and water. They agreed. 4 days, I walked beside them, listening, learning, remembering how the world outside still turned, even while our village stood still. We passed Roman soldiers stationed at distant forts. We saw merchants selling silk from the east. We heard stories of emperors and wars, of triumphs and betrayals. And yet, no one spoke of _last hope _. No one remembered us. If you're watching this and feeling lost, know that you are not alone. Maybe you've faced hardship. Maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe you've had doors slammed in your face and voices raised against you. Maybe you feel like no one sees you. But I see you, and I want you to remember something. Survival is not about being the strongest. It's about enduring one more day, one more night, one more moment, until you find your way forward, wherever you are, whether in a city or a village, in comfort or in struggle. Never forget that you have the power to rise, even when the world tries to bury you, even when the sky feels heavy and the ground feels weak. You have already made it this far, and if I could survive the poorest village in the Roman Empire, then you can survive anything.